Death, taxes, a Payday 2 update releasing within a few weeks of the last. We've been spoiled recently, as sidetrack games are seriously on fire with this cadence, and although this one appears to be less significant in terms of gameplay altering changes than recent updates, what it's done for one of the most iconic cosmetic systems of all time in mass creation is nothing short of incredible. This is in addition to the re-release of Jacket as a standalone purchasable DLC, meaning you no longer require Steam ownership of the digital special edition of Hotline Miami 2 to enjoy one of the best character and perk deck combinations in the game. Combine this with our first proper glimpses of what new, freshly created content is going to look like for Payday 2, as well as the usual swathe of bug fixes and balance passes, and you have yet another update worth reinstalling the game for on its own. Long may this continue. So let's start, as all good videos should, with Jacket. What's going on with Chicken Man and how does it affect you? Well, if you already owned him in Payday 2 via the aforementioned Hotline Miami 2 wrong number deal, you don't need to do anything. Your ownership status remains unchanged, and in your inventory you'll have a nice little bonus. The Mega version of Richard Returns, equipped with the usual glowing effect we expect from these Mega Masks, and Vaporwave eyes exclusive to Jacket, in addition to some bonus viscera from previous bat-based excursions. It's a cool mask, which you can elevate even further thanks to the revamped Mask Customization I'll get onto in a minute. However, if you didn't previously own Jacket, you now have a cheaper option to do so without paying for a game you may not necessarily want to play. The $2.99 DLC contains everything you used to receive in the bundle, so Jacket, all his weapons and attachments including the Carpenter's Delight Hammer, the Hotline Miami 2 mask, and most importantly, the Sociopath perk deck. One of the most fun decks in the entire game, and also a fairly viable one across higher difficulties. There's a reason why it's my most used perk deck of choice across all challenge runs, bearing in mind it gives every build, no matter how weak they are otherwise, a consistent method of dispatching dozers with its 10 times melee multiplier, in addition to armor-gating properties only really second to Anarchist. This is particularly important for players in Australia or any other region locked out of purchasing Hotline Miami in the first place. Mind you, they used to just give it away to you guys for free, but I suppose Starbreeze stopped being a charity around the same time they stopped printing money with other Payday 2 DLCs. To be honest, whilst not a thrilling development even for Jacket fans, at the very least this is a case of making game content more accessible rather than less, as had become a trend with other licensed properties in Payday over the past few years. If by some chance you've missed out on Jacket in the past, this is a more cost-effective and convenient way to procure him, as well as that shiny new mask variant. On the topic of masks, I need to give you an overview of the improvements made to the system probably closest to my heart in all of Payday 2. The Mask Creator Suite has received a complete functional overhaul, whilst many of the game's masks and patterns have also received some much needed love. Reflections have been fixed and high quality versions of certain patterns have been added to avoid that horrible stretched and blotchy effect which haunted some of the more expansive masks. Just look at how majestic Heiston looks now. As for the system itself, the Sidetrack crew have added literally hundreds of thousands of possible mask design combinations by expanding the material and pattern colour options to now include both, in addition to a third accent slot which picks out the outline of certain patterns to give them a more distinct colour, tone or sheen. Effectively, you now have your base coat, which functions like the old material section used to, but now also gives you access to the flat colour tones used to exclusively function alongside patterns, with accents 1, 2 and 3 adding colours and effects to those patterns, or in some cases components of the mask directly. These can also include the original matte colour options we're used to, in addition to the old materials, resulting in potentially brand new texture and colour combinations. I messed around with this for far longer than I care to admit, just fiddling around with designs and seeing how far we can now push the system. You've heard of Couch Baby, look at the next stage of its evolution. All jokes aside, you can do some seriously cool things with this new customization system, making already top tier masks even better. For instance, this is a runner up in my 2020 Mask of the Year competition, and one of my personal all time favourites. When we throw in materials where only colours used to exist, we can take that design to the next level in my opinion. Hell, I'm so impressed by what this update has done for mask customization that I'm exceptionally tempted to host another design competition for the first time in 6 years. If that would be of interest, let me know, and of course share your initial experimental results in the comments below. I'm really intrigued to see how far this new framework can be pushed. That's the most impactful element of this update covered, but there's still dozens of little tweaks and thoughtful additions well worth covering. For example, Sidetrack have added their very first new weapon to the game in the form of the Shock Baton. This is a perfect concealment melee option with the electrocution effect added, making it the third of its kind in the game. Crucially though, this one is accessible to all with no strings attached, unlike the buzzer, which is tied to the Golden Grin DLC, or the brass knuckles, which came for free alongside Jimmy in the now removed Hardcore Henry pack. In other words, this is the only way to own a shock melee if you just buy the base game without DLC in 2026. A really thoughtful, if low impact addition for most of us in the community, and something I'd love to see replicated across other licensed weapons new accounts have lost access to, tied to things like Point Break or John Wick. A simple way to make sure all players have access to the meta melee option for like 90% of the game's builds. Additionally, the guys are making more spawn group adjustments in the background, this time targeting the upper limit on spawn cop groups, meaning rather than a rate of spawn reduction, they're tightening the cap on total spawns, albeit only marginally across the harder difficulties. I didn't notice much of a difference when playing solo, certainly not to the extent I did when rates were tweaked, but you'll potentially feel the hordes have been slightly thinned out when playing with a full crew. A couple of appreciated fixes to mention as well. They finally added back the shockproof ace animation when reflecting taser shock effects back in their direction. I always thought this was quite a satisfying little detail, and I've no idea why or even when it was removed, but once again, restored content is probably good content in my experience. They've also fixed a long-standing bug giving the China Puff certain shotgun-like properties, meaning it could crit, which isn't intended on explosives, something I actually abused to my benefit during the Demo Man challenge run many moons ago. Silent sentries no longer have hurt boxes on their suppressors, meaning they could previously take damage through their shields, resulting in them being much less potent within turret builds than their loud alternatives. A nice little buff for those of you holdout enjoyers who love going AFK and letting their AI army do the heavy lifting. Oh, and high explosive ammo is now dealing the same self-damage it used to prior to the last update. For anyone wondering why there was any uproar when this was seemingly buffed in the player's favour, that's because top players and speedrunners used to hit highly specific Berserker ranges, which no longer worked on update 242.1. Yep, that is how close to the community the Sidetrack team is. Even minor adjustments that receive negative feedback are responded to swiftly. Finally, there's a few miscellaneous improvements you might notice in the background, for example the search bars added to the melee and mask editor menus, making navigation much easier when seeking that one bloody pattern out of 100. Also within menus you'll notice the elemental status effect icons have been added next to their respective melee weapons, making the new shock baton easier to spot at a glance. Without a doubt, this is a lower impact in-heist patch than what we've grown accustomed to over the past few months, but the mask designing overhaul is, in my opinion, genuinely monumental. For those who don't know my history, I got a start on YouTube making videos showcasing Payday mask creations of all things, so this one is quite close to my heart. A system that's been begging for iteration for years, which failed to arrive in Payday 3, finally getting the love it demands. Aside from eventually being able to manually move patterns around a mask or potentially layer them, I can't think of too many ways to better this improvement, so many thanks to Rex in particular, who I believe spent a lot of time working on this. As for the other core additions, I think it's interesting to see the team teasing us with the idea of new creations. I don't think they're going to stop at a mask and a melee weapon, although it will be interesting to see how the community reacts to a price tag if they return to DLC. Goodwill for the Sidetrack guys is at an all-time high, so I wouldn't expect a great deal of backlash aimed at them, but I don't see Starbreeze avoiding ridicule for returning to their golden goose once more. What I think is most important is that they remain so tapped into community sentiment. Seeing them start to address concerns around a lack of free alternatives to weapons and lost licensed content with the new melee is an excellent sign. And I'm sure some people will massively appreciate Jacket becoming more accessible in Payday 2 again, given all the history behind that DLC and collaboration. Anyway, that's it for today's update video. I hope you're having a great February. When I'm not busy being sick, I'm doing alright, making some decent progress on the next challenge run, and of course, most importantly, my annual Payday 2 mod video. Hope you enjoyed, take care, and I'll see you all very soon. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.